Hey everyone, and welcome to the Doctors of Running podcast, where we, a group of doctors of physical therapy, talk about the art and the science of what we put on our feet. Today, it is just myself and Dr. Salas here. We're doing an exciting episode to start the new year. Happy New Year, by the way. Happy New Year, Dr. Salas.
Thank you. Happy New Year, Dr. Klein.
And we're going to start out this new year reviewing a very interesting shoe that we've had, and also talking about what we're most excited for in 2023. By this time, things are starting to come out. We've seen a lot of photos now that TRE has, all the photos from videos from TRE has circulated. So we're going to talk about, first review this shoe, specifically the Wave Rebellion Pro from Mizuno. And then we'll talk about, again, what we're most excited for. So our subjective, by the way, is what shoes are you looking forward to most in 2023? This is usually that beginning of the year where you've already gotten the hype from like November, December, getting to see stuff. In below, whatever medium you're listening or watching this on, comment what shoe or thing you're most excited for. I guess we can say thing now because there's some interesting stuff coming out in 2023. David, just off the bat, do you have something that you're like, we'll talk about it later, but something that you're most excited for in 2023?
Yeah, a lot of it's just kind of like words and things that surface on the internet, whatever we've seen at TRE. Sources may or may not be from TRE per se, but I think I'm probably looking forward most to the racing shoe lineup. I mean, that's just kind of like daily trainers are always daily trainers to me, and like for those that have been following us for a while, I feel like most of my like favorite daily trainers are actually like, and I mean this in the nicest way, but like a little bit quote unquote boring. Like I kind of like something just natural, works with my stride, it's solid. Okay, we can move on to the next thing. But for the racing shoes, it's kind of fun to have that like special sauce component. I'm probably looking forward most. I'd probably have to say you've been seeing the photos of the Vaporfly Next Percent 3 floating around. Saucony Endorphin Elite, and then probably the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 2. Ooh. Those are probably the three that like I've been eyeing a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's more out there that's going to come, that's going to kind of rock my world a little bit. But yeah, those are probably the three off the top of my head.
Sweet. So we'll come back to that in a minute.
Oh, TRE too.
Yeah, TRE.
My apologies. Yeah. TRE means the running event.
Yes.
The running event. Yeah. It's in Austin. It's a conference for the listeners that if you have never heard of it, it's just a conference of all the running shoes, running companies, apparel, footwear alike, all kind of come into the same event. And it's just a big conference. So,
which we, of course, all miss because we all have full-time jobs and don't do this as our full-time thing. But, however, I'm going to say it now, Doctors Running is going to be at TRE 2023. We're all doing this. We're going to go as a team. It's going to be a blast. I don't think TRE is going to be ready for us. But let's dive into what one of the biggest things that's going to be coming out pretty much right now is the Mizuno Wave Rebellion Pro. So David's actually had more. I have 90 miles on my pair, but believe it or not, David actually has more experience with this shoe in ways I don't know if we can talk about. But David, do you have this? Did you want to read the specs off?
Sure. I mean, I don't actually know the stack heights from the heel to the forefoot. That we just don't know those. Yeah, but what we do know is that it is legal by World Athletic Standards. It's been for a while now. I think they got it ratified in July, I believe. 4.5 millimeter drop, so heels 4.5 millimeters higher than the forefoot. Listed weight should be right around 7.9 ounces for men's size 9. My shoe is 9.5, and I actually weighed it in at 7.4 ounces. I will preface this by saying, like, our pairs did come off of the sample line. This was an early release for the Kakazomi, colorway specifically. It's really cool because, like, this crazy design you see is actually an ink blot, and it translates to the letters PB. So that's kind of a fun fact for the design behind the shoe there on the colorway. But 7.9 ounces, men's size 9. Mine's 9.5, weighs a little bit lighter. But the sample line that we got, it does run about a half size small, at least for me. It should be cleaned up by the final production version. That should definitely be cleaned up. But yeah.
I've had the same thing where, for this, again, just to introduce this shoe, this is Mizuno's first available racing shoe in the United States since I don't know how long. I think I would mention this earlier that it's like the last one I can really think of, and someone please comment below if I'm wrong, it's the Mizuno Wave Universe series, which that was a long time ago. And Mizuno typically waits, but this is a Mizuno super shoe. It's got a ton of foam underfoot, again, coming in at super lightweight for how much foam there is. And whatever the stack height is, it is pushing right up against that like limit. It's huge. You are way off the ground. There is a plate in here. It is not full carbon from what we understand. It is a nylon. It is carbon infused nylon. And then there's some other stuff that there's also some like plant-based stuff in the plate as well. There's two different foams here. There's the Mizuno Energy Light Plus on the top and Mizuno Energy Light on the bottom, both of which that top foam is super soft. And it's very interesting. There's the G3 outsole, which I love. I love this stuff. It's nubby and it's always surprisingly durable. I have 90 miles on my pair and I still haven't torn through it. So kudos Mizuno. This shoe has survived me, which is a big deal. This is my left shoe, by the way. It's a super shoe. I think this is one of the closest probably the best ones I've experienced since the Alpha Fly, but we'll talk about that in just a second. One of the craziest thing though is nothing on the market, at least in the United States, like this. Talk about the geometry. This is a very different shoe from what we've seen here.
Right. So when I take a look at the traditional super shoe, I mean, I hate to say this, but like because Nike was the one that hit it first, a lot of people have kind of created a shoe that's similar, not even to the Alpha Fly, but to the Vaporfly. Like when you take a look at the Vaporfly 4%, Next Percent 2, you look at some similar geometries from some other companies, it all looks pretty similar to a Vaporfly. This shoe is not that. It's very unique. It's definitely its own super shoe. And I'm not just saying that as a marketing ploy. This shoe is definitely very unique and provides a different experience, but still one that's very lively and race ready. And it's one of the super shoes that I have really enjoyed. There's a couple things that might deter me from choosing it depending on the race, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, the shoe's definitely race ready, and I would probably say it's the closest thing in the forefoot that I have felt to Alpha Fly version 1. Ooh. Very lively, very fast, very responsive toe off at the forefoot. So it's a cool poppy shoe, fast transitioning through the heel. And we were talking about geometric designs here. So basically when you take a look at it, you have a very sharply rounded bevel in the heel there. That's something like right off the bat, people are like, whoa, okay. I'm not going to be able to heel strike in that. False. You actually can. Klein heel strikes pretty hard, and he still enjoys this shoe.
Yeah.
It's just beveled really hard. It transitions you really quick into that midfoot, and then it's a really interesting experience. Our audio engineer, BJ, actually described it pretty well. It almost feels like a little pogo in the midfoot.
Yes. Totally agree.
When you take a look at on the outside, you can't see it. On the lateral side, it's all covered. But on the medial side, you can see the plate. And it's got this almost like little like inverted U there that you can notice that. Like you feel like you're sitting over that midfoot part, and then like it has just a little bit of flux to it, and then it just transitions you onto that forefoot really fast. And so that's when that shoe really comes alive, is from the midfoot forward. So they kind of wasted no time on the heel. They were just like, not that you can't heel strike. Again, it's beveled, like you can land and roll through. It just happens quick. So you're going to go midfoot to forefoot, very quick, bounce off, responsive forefoot. So that's the difference in the geometry here. And like I think it's notable in the experience you actually have on foot too.
Yeah, I think the geometry is looks crazy, but not actually that crazy on foot. When I was thinking about this, I was doing a threshold run the other day on this. It reminds me of a really extreme Skechers M Strike, where if you're on the heel, it's kind of like, this is okay, but you got to get up. And actually, for the viewers, where the heel transitions into the midfoot, that little pivot point right here, that is like, to me, feels like the best place to land. Because if you hit that, it pogos you forward and transitions you really quick. And I think the plate design, it's different than the Rebellion, just because the way it's designed is actually super cool, where they have like this kind of most plates typically look like a spoon. This is a little different, where it's a little flatter, and then the forefoot is that there's a hole in the forefoot where it's just kind of like the plate goes around it with a gap there, and it's called Speed Assist. So I'm really kind of curious about how that might affect biomechanics, but it creates this ride that seems to work really, really well. There's a honeycomb pattern apparently in the midfoot, which probably my guess would be kind of further compresses at that angle, just like where this pivot point is, and probably works with the foam to, again, push you forward. If you're this is a shoe that it's a tool, and you got to use this tool right. If you're landing pretty hard back here in the rear foot, you'll be fine. You can still enjoy this shoe, but you don't really maximize the performance unless you get into that one point. And I found that over and over. When I'm hitting that right part, everything's smooth. When things get sloppy, not quite as much. But the other interesting thing is, I think one of the largest carve outs, which when I first saw this, I shouldn't have been surprised because Mizuno has always done fairly large cutouts in their midsoles. It's nice to see this full ground contact, but I feel like this was translated from some of their trainers, which they haven't.
Like some of the Wave Riders and Inspires, and they've cut up to the plate. Yeah.
So it's been the recent ones have been more full ground contact, but I think they saved a lot of weight doing this. What do you think about the gap in the midfoot?
Yeah, it's an interesting experience because I can see it going one of two ways. And you kind of described it when you start to get a little bit fatigued, you start rocking around a little bit more. It's almost like, not that you're fighting the shoe, but it's not the same experience you get when you're fresh.
Right.
And I've run over 20 miles in one run in this shoe, and it's been fine. But it was also at a controlled pace, Where I'm going with this is I notice with the cutout, it feels like it kind of puts you in a really fast pronation moment from the initial contact and loading response into that mid stance. Not necessarily a bad thing because it does have that wide forefoot platform with good traction, and it just feels like it makes you want to transition fast. It makes you want to be up on that midfoot and forefoot and really turning over. That's fine. It's a racing shoe. If you want to feel lively and quick and fast, this shoe certainly makes you feel that. But what I will say, if you take a look at that cutout, okay. Hit my shoe on the table when I was lifting it up. The cutout's pretty deep, right? If we take a look at the medial side, look how much stack is in between that. So that's how much is cut out here. It almost acts like a little crash pad on the heel through the midfoot, but then when it cuts this far over, if you look, that's a decent little gap there. Yep. And then this is still a cutout. I'd have to really put it close to the camera for the viewers, but that's still cut out through that region as well. Let's see if that camera can focus on that. There you go. Okay. So you can see, not all the way to the plate, but it's still cut out as it extends into that forefoot. Why that matters, it feels a little bit unstable in turns for me and on cambered roads and things like that. When you're transitioning through that loading response and through that middle stance, this is really all you got. This tiny little piece on that lateral side. And yes, it's only for a moment. It's not that long, but it's enough to make you feel a little bit ginger when you're turning. So unless you tippy toe those turns and you're on your forefoot and you either attack them aggressively and then hope it works out, or you come in a little bit ginger and come wide. So for U-turns, sharp turns, this isn't something that I really favor very much, or on cambered roads.
Yeah. I totally agree where this shoe does not get a stable neutral rating for me, despite a couple nice factors. It's got pretty solid sidewalls, both on the lateral and medial sides right in the midfoot. The plate design, I can feel kind of pushing up. So if you like a little extra pressure in your arch, and it does have, not that foot shape necessarily matters, because that's not a valid way to prescribe footwear. It's got a little higher arch here. So it does feel good. It's just not a stable neutral shoe for a couple reasons. A, stack height so soft, it's soft, it's tall, it's pretty soft. And then that gap, if you're not, as David said, if you're not transitioning quick enough, I feel myself kind of go over that. And it's not that it's obvious, it's just I notice it from a fatigue standpoint with longer miles. I raced a 5K in this shoe. It was great. It was a little bulkier than I would have liked, but I still enjoyed it. It was consistent. Definitely, in my mind, works better for longer efforts. Maybe 10K, definitely half marathon for people with kind of stable mechanics. It's just that little thing kind of negates it over the long distances with being stable neutral. But I think they did a decent job with the rest of it. That's just that piece. I personally would have filled that in and then just had a bigger gap underneath here just to kind of create that more guided ride. That's not going to, there's a lot of people that's not going to affect, but for those like myself that go, hey, I'm kind of looking at how is it going to like guide my mechanics as I start to fatigue? That's something I'd pay attention to. I did have a harder time. I'm curious to know what you think where the shoe goes best, but going back to the sizing stuff, I had a hard time taking this super long just because for me, because it's sample, it fits a half size short, so I can handle probably like 5-6 miles in it. And then when I start going beyond that, like I get way too much pressure on my toes just because ours is, the sizing is a little bit off. So we'll get a production pair and we'll update this as soon as possible how the fit is. But outside of that, upper is great. But what do you think this shoe is best for? What do you think?
I'd say half marathon.
Yeah.
I'd definitely say half marathon. It's got a very lively and fast transition, but it likes you to be in rhythm too. It's not one of those ones where it's like, oh, I gotta be on my toes. It's not like a track spike where you're like, oh, I need to be running fast in order for this to work. Like you can still run a controlled pace underneath your legs and still really fall into rhythm in this shoe. I agree. I feel like at 5K pacing, it's a little bit much. I don't think I'd really want this for a road 5K. I think 10K could be a toss-up. Yeah. I think you could probably argue 10K. I did run a half marathon in this shoe. It was good. I feel like pacing's fine. I think half marathon pacing's great in this shoe. I think full marathon pacing is great in this shoe. It's just going to come down to the individual and how they like their transitions and what they want out of their shoe. But I said this it's funny, I did a video about this shoe earlier today, but so I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I'm not, because it's like Klein hasn't heard me say any of this. Yeah. But like
I'm
in a straight line, like if you were to control all variables and just go run, I feel like this shoe is very hard to beat from a responsiveness and transition standpoint through that forefoot. Very, very good, very quick, fast, rolls you through, and it's like yearning for the next step. Like it just wants you to keep going. But when you put real world variables into it, not all roads are flat. I'd probably say most are cambered. And for the most part, like it can do most roads. But I notice if you're like on a country road or something that's a little bit longer, or maybe it's got to navigate for irrigation or something like, and it's just got a little bit of a sharper slope to it, it doesn't do well there. And in getting ready for CIM and things like that, I was thinking about that. And like, I really like this shoe. This is a shoe that was definitely on the table, but that was the deal breaker. You know, you're running from Folsom to Sacramento. You got some country roads out there where the road's a little bit more cambered. Maybe some of the roads aren't fully covered with the blacktop quite yet. You know, there's not a little bit more cracks and things in the road. I just wanted to trust my footing a little bit more. So like this shoe doesn't quite check that box. With that said, traction is actually quite good.
Yes.
It's more the other variables.
It's the other. Yeah. I found when I took this with me to Oregon when I went to visit over the previous holidays, and the G3 outsole is awesome. Where on wet road, totally fine, grips it well. Has to do with how tall this thing is, which leads me to my next thing. What shoe would you you mentioned it earlier, but I'm just going to repeat it. What shoe would you compare this most to?
Yeah, and that was off. That was off the record, so I guess like we could put it on the record, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is like one of the closest thing, and for the viewers that have been following us for a while, you guys know I love this shoe. This is like one of the closest things to the Alpha Fly version 1 that I've ever felt. I mean, especially through midfoot, through the forefoot, this thing is very lively. I mean, it transitions quick, like it's got super shoe DNA. I'm not just saying that. This shoe runs very, very fast off that forefoot, like midfoot through forefoot. And honestly, you can even argue heel through toe. Like if you load it just right, like Klein was saying earlier, if you hit it just before that pivotal point, like that plate has a little bit of flex to it. And I'm glad it does. I feel like if it was too rigid, like it would almost feel jarring. And I like that it has a little bit of flex and give to it. And you kind of like load it and then you spring off of that forefoot. But yeah, I'd say it's close to Alpha Fly version 1. I've got Alpha Fly version 2 next to me. Alpha Fly version 1 is not within arm's reach. It's in the building. It's right over, let me see here. Let me see. There's 2. One is, for the listeners, I'm trying to point at my shoe wall here. There we go.
Yeah.
There's Alpha Fly 1.
And I've got a pair too.
That was like a solid wasted 3 seconds. But I've got Alpha Fly 2 right here. But
Yeah.
Alpha Fly 2 is a little bit different. Like, they made some changes that make it clearly different from version 1. It's still a great shoe. I think it's more of a marathon racing shoe. Like, they stayed true to brand, but they made it the long distance racer. Like, there's no wiggle room here. Like, it's not really something I'd want to wear for 5K for me, personally.
Yeah.
Like, I would definitely, if I was staying in the Nike lineup, I would be wearing the Vaporfly for a 5K, and I'd be wearing the Alpha Fly for a marathon, for me. That's just how it is. It's 8.4 ounces in my 9.5. Like, this shoe has got some weight to it. They widened it out. They made it stable. They dropped the drop ratio. They dropped the drop ratio, increased the drop ratio. From 4 millimeters to 8 millimeters. They made it a little bit more forgiving. They widened it out. They made those sidewalls a little bit higher. They basically focused on making a more stable Alpha Fly and Alpha Fly version 2. So, for the sake of comparison, this compares more to this being Rebellion Pro from Mizuno, compares more to Alpha Fly version 1 than it does version 2 to me.
And I would totally agree with you. And I not too long ago got a pair of Alpha Fly 1s on eBay just to compare this. And I think a lot of companies have, and yeah, again, Nike was the one that kind of kickstarted this. The Vaporfly and Alpha Fly were so far ahead of their time that people have been playing catch up. But I think last year we talked about Endorphin Pro 3. I think the Vaporfly has been caught. We'll have to talk about the Vaporfly Next Percent 3 and see where that is. But I think companies have caught up to the Vaporfly. The Alpha Fly was previously untouched, but I think for the first time, the Wave Rebellion Pro really hits that. And I think this is a very comparable shoe in terms of, like, I think we need a new category. I feel like the Alpha Fly and the Wave Rebellion do not fit in the quote unquote super shoes because they're like a step above. Maybe it's the super long distance shoes. They're just different.
They're just different. Yeah. Like I think the Vaporfly, one of the reasons why it took off so well was because it's still, even though it has the rocker within the plate, on the design through that forefoot, the actual, I got it right here. Let me grab it. The actual geometry still isn't that crazy. It's just like, it's a beveled heel. There's a toe spring, but like, it's not some crazy unique geometry that has never been done before. It's more so just the materials mixed together.
Right.
Using the P-backs, using the carbon plate, using the drop ratio to kind of load the plate. And then they kind of have that sharper toe spring right at the end in the plate as well. And so you kind of like have this little rolling motion coupled with the bounce. Like, that was just something that no one really did yet with the foam, at least with the 4%.
Yeah.
Like you said, like, I think they have been caught as well. I think the Metaspeed Edge Plus is basically a Vaporfly, just with an ASICS logo on it. There's a couple differences. I think it's a little bit more of a stable option. We can go down that rabbit hole. But I mean, for the sake of just a generalized argument, I think most companies have made something that is comparable or close.
Right. And I think nobody had previously made something similar to the Alpha Fly 1. I know Puma attempted. The Fast R, in my mind, is not comparable to the Rebellion Pro or Alpha Fly. I think it's too different. Yeah, I want to see that forefoot foam in a full length shoe, but it's just not the same. So this is the major competitor. If you like the Alpha Fly, the Rebellion Pro is going to be your serious alternative. There's going to be some other shoes that we'll mention that might be some alternatives coming up next year. Well, not this year.
No, there's one that's out.
Which one?
X-Tep, baby.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It is. I'm going to go out on the limb. It is.
I'm going to agree.
And you had it ready.
Yeah, I did. It needs to be a little lighter. It's a little heavier still.
No, but we're talking like marathon
That's
plus.
Fair. Yeah.
It's 8.6 ounces in my size.
Yeah, I'm holding up the X-Step, was it 160X
3.0
Pro. Oh my God, people stop with the super long names for shoes. But yeah, I would agree with you that it's got a similar Alpha Fly feel. It's just not, it's almost there. It's not
it's
quite,
almost,
but
it's just slightly off.
All right, we got 2.5. We got 2.5. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I would say I can handle that shoe better in turns than I can handle Rebellion Pro, but it also is a full ounce heavier than it is than the Rebellion Pro, in my size. So it's, you give and you take, but that's another really lively forefoot, you know, that like the transitions are there. It almost feels like this weird in between where it's like this would be a great performance trainer for my Alpha Fly. However,
that's interesting. Yeah.
I could like a training companion, but like I could still race in this shoe. Like I don't think I'd want to for half marathon, but like I could swing it for marathon, I think. Like, but it's still like 8.6. It's like, man, there's trainers lighter than 8.6. Like where do I draw this line?
Hey, and so we'll see for we'll see for this year. A
lot of promise though. Yeah. Shout out Xtep if you've never heard of them, but that shoe is it's a diamond in the rough there. I don't think it's getting enough press.
So to summarize again, maybe Xtep 163 3.0 Pro, but Rebellion and Alpha Fly for sure. Shoes like the Vaporfly, Endorphin Pro 3, Metaspeed, Edge Plus are really not comparable. Like it's kind of just they're different. Whereas a lot of those shoes, like when I did the 5K recently, the Rebellion Pro was fun, but I really wished I had a Endorphin Pro 3 on just because it's lighter, a little more. I can turn over a little quicker in it. Whereas the Rebellion Pro is going to be more of a long distance shoe, where that's something that's it feels better at those kind of consistent paces where you're not trying to run super fast. You're just trying to run fast for long. So that brings me, but that's personal. That's kind of how I feel. I'm hearing you echo that. But who do you think this shoe is going to work for, and who do you think it's not going to work for?
Yeah, I think we talk about how you interact with the plate and where you land, and like if you're kind of on that late heel strike, early midfoot type land. But I think those that also land on their forefoot are, small population. But I think those that do land there genuinely are still going to really like this shoe, mainly because that platform is still pretty wide. If you look in the forefoot itself,
definitely in the forefoot. That
not necessarily the upper. The upper is actually kind of narrow as it tapers into the toe box.
Yeah,
it's got a very track spike like fit, and from one of the videos I saw at TRE, that was on purpose. This was modeled after a track spike, as far as the upper and the fit and everything goes. That aside, looking at the platform itself and the outsole pattern, this is a wide, grippy forefoot. So for those that really like to lever off of that forefoot, this shoe's got a lot of life in that region. And it's one that definitely responds and answers the call. If you are someone that likes to sit back a little bit more on those heels, it could still, it might work, but it's going to be, you got to get through that midfoot smooth. So it all just kind of depends on how well you roll and how familiar you are with your own mechanics and how you interact with the shoe. But I think for those that don't have too high of stability demands, they trust their footing, they know how they can navigate turns, different terrain, things like that, a little bit more sure-footed, I think they will respond well to the shoe. I'm not horrible at it. I'm not great at it either. I feel like I can run in dirt. I can run in some trails. I'm not going to be sending it down too many technical sections. I think I'm very in the middle. And as someone that's does mostly road running and or runnable trail, I think it works well enough for me, but I did have to tippy toe a couple turns. When we do some workouts, I've got a couple turns in a little loop thing that we do. There's one that's a solid, I don't know, maybe 80-degree turn, that I struggled a little bit with. I noticed I got to turn a little bit wider. I kind of have to plan my cut and my turn a little bit more in this shoe. And I think if I'm racing, I don't want to do that. So it all kind of depends on the course and how I'm navigating things. But for those that really lever off that forefoot and know where their foot is in space and they can plant it and predict it and move off of those types of positions, I think it's fine. I think it's great. It's a really, really fun shoe. It's just one of those ones that I don't know if I have as good of footing and stability needed to hit those types of environments and terrain. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I will say this is not a trail shoe, and I would encourage people.
Certainly not.
David's a different breed. I would not do. That's judgmental. I took the Metaspeed Sky Original on a trail. I would not take this on a trail just because it's a Mizuno and things are I guarantee there's gonna get a rock stuck in there at some point. But this is really a road racing shoe. But I do agree with you that I think that those who kind of lever and are able to utilize this shoe really well in terms of being able to find that sweet spot that's right here or get up a little bit farther forward. Not that only people that land on their forefoot are going to enjoy this, but there's that kind of sweet spot right here that you really got to hit. And I think people that tend to, foot strike, again, is going to be variable depending on the person, but those people who tend to have that kind of like heel strike that's still under their body, that's probably going to kick this off really well. And like you said, people that tend to sit back a lot and they have a really high like inclination angle, that may not be the best. There may be some other shoes. The other group that's probably not going to do as well is those people that really, really, really need a stable midfoot. Just because of that gap. If you need the sensation of guide or sidewall and stuff like that, it actually works really, really well. I'm curious to see what the true to size fit for me is, and I'll have to get back to everybody on that as the person needs stability. But yeah, I think it's people that have a little bit more stable mechanics and just like a little sidewall feel. Those are probably going to do a little bit better. Not that people without any stability or that have some stability issues could enjoy this for maybe some shorter distances. But I think those that are using this for longer distances, this is going to be better where you can ease into it. I forgot what else I was going to say about who might benefit from this. Dang it. Little senior moment.
I don't know. That was a good point, though. People that land underneath themselves.
Yeah. I think
regardless if it's forefoot, midfoot, heel strike, doesn't matter. I think that's kind of what I was trying to get at. I just didn't say those words where it's like, if you turn over well and you transition quick, regardless of where you land, this will be fine. Yeah.
The other group, again, this thing is super tall off the ground. I don't think the camera does it justice to how massive this shoe is. So you got to be able to handle being that far away from the ground. And we've talked about this before, and you and I have talked about this in terms of proprioception and things like that. You got to be okay being that high off the ground. This is super tall. This is an Alpha Fly with a little more unique geometry in the heel. You got to be used to that. And I think when I run in this shoe, I always find myself afterwards kind of like going, oh, this feels really good to get something close to the ground. Like I warmed up in the Brooks Divide 3 the other day, which is this like kind of like closer to the ground.
Shoe, right?
It's a trail shoe, right? It's like a road to trail shoe. And I was like, wow, I'm really happy to have something firm after this because it's just that contrast. So yes, it's the closest thing I think we've experienced for the Alpha Fly 1. Great job, Mizuno. It's going to be an interesting shoe. I'm even more excited to try this in a true to size fit because the upper is very, as you mentioned, it's inspired by track spike. So it's very thin, teeny little heel counter. It's mostly flexible, but track spike like fit, but very much a super shoe, longer distance shoe for people that want to be able to have kind of the ultimate performance for marathon, maybe half marathon.